Well, welcome. Thank you for visiting me. I'm Dr. Symmes Sawyer, and this is the Sawyer, actually this part of the Sawyer end of the cemetery. My son, Symmes Jr., is right there, and his family. All right, and actually, this is where my son is buried. So his son, my son, my daughter-in-law, me, my wife, and then I have a couple of children. And if you look, you see that one with the circle, the ball on top? Right in back is my son Moses. Now Moses did a lot of historical writing on the Symmes family. He died 1907. So a number of us are here, and also right in those stones there too. There's some older ones. But yes, I was a doctor, and I was born in 1766. Don't hold it against me, but it was in Massachusetts. I guess since I've been buried here since 1845, I'm no longer considered a flatlander. But I was born in Massachusetts, Amesbury, as a matter of fact. And my father John, my mother Elizabeth. The family, the Sawyer family, goes way back to the 1600s, on when the British started to come over here and to settle in the colonies. Now, as I said, John and Elizabeth were my parents, and I studied medicine, but it wasn't going to a school for medicine. I studied under a doctor in Ipswich. It was like years ago. To be a lawyer, you would read the law. You would sign up. You would have a lawyer to have you work in your office. You would read the law books, and then you would take the bar test. So doing this work, I worked with a doctor. Now, some people, actually, my son Moses said that I attended Dartmouth. Yeah, pretty fancy college. So let's all have room to believe I went to Dartmouth. And if you want to believe it, I went to Dartmouth. I graduated first in a class of 3. So it was a pretty good graduation. I actually went to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but it was not Harvard. And I went to a school there. Now, I opened a hospital for smallpox, right, in the southern part of New Hampshire. And to try to treat people with smallpox. There was a terrible epidemic, terrible smallpox. It was a killer. So I tried to open up, I did have a hospital, and people were actually being cured. What was happening is all these sick people were going to the town. And that upset the people who lived in the town, so they had a meeting and closed the hospital and sent all the sick people home. All right, so they had a town meeting to close me down. Now, in 1888, I married my first wife, Lois. Lovely, lovely woman. Didn't last long, but she was lovely while she was here. All right. So Lois passed on. Then I married my second wife, Ruth. Now, Ruth passed on. I married Ruth shortly after Lois, because remember, I was 23 years old, and winters are cold up here. So I married real shortly after Lois died. I married Ruth. Now, in 1804, Ruth gave birth and died in childbirth. 3 months later, our daughter died. Now, Lois and Ruth are not here. They're in the southern part of the state. We do get to visit on occasion, because being in this state, we can easily communicate. So, shortly after that, a year later, I married Elizabeth and fathered 9 children. 9 children. 6 sons, of which 2 are buried here with me. Well, actually 3. 1 there, and 1 in this row. Now, I think it was around 1814, sometimes I get my dates. When you've been down for so long, you kind of lose time. No one gives you a calendar when you're in there. And it's pretty dark, you can't read it anyway. So, for a period of time, we had lived for a little over a year in Littleton. up north. Now, I did most of my traveling was by foot. Now, to go from here, to walk from here to Littleton is about a 15-hour walk. All right, a hike. If you took a horse, it would take you about 9 or 10. Now, I see these new things out here, driving by the hedges, going by, and I imagine they're so fast that you could probably get to Littleton in maybe 3.5 hours. So how things have speeded up since I've been gone. There goes another one. Speeded up since I've been gone. We moved back here, and I took my family, moved up. We were the first settlers on Mount Silly. All right, and so I had a farm up there. And being a doctor, education was so important to me, so very important to me, being a doctor. So the first school was held in my barn. And they had the town meetings in my barn. All right. So the first school was in the barn, and we lived up on Mount Silly. Whenever I made a house call, I used to walk. There were many times I'd be gone overnight because it was such a long journey to get to the house call. And, how did I know I had a house call? Well, they would send someone. It took them 6 hours to get to me. Then took us 6 hours to get back there, apply proper treatment to the patient, and then 6 hours to come home. I would oftentimes spend the evening and care for the patient, leave early in the morning. Now, it was rather difficult sometimes with that 6-7 hour walk back home because they would pay me in chickens. So I'd have like 4 or 5 chickens, live chickens, with their feet tied on a pole in back of me. And but my wife could tell that I was coming because they could hear the chickens from a distance. Now, also, which one of you, I have a cant dog in here. Which one of you ordered the tooth extraction? Because
I think it's in another group.
not only,
Group,
doctors did no one wants a tooth extracted?
No.
All right, because I also did, I was also a dentist. The doctor also did dental work. And I had someone ask me, so how did you pull the teeth? Well, it was easy. You put someone in the chair, you kneel on their chest and yank. And if they had any wits about them, they probably self-medicated on the way to the appointment, if you know what I mean. So many times when they arrived to the office, they would be helped into the chair, and they would just kind of pour themselves into the chair. I pulled a tooth, and when they came around, the tooth was gone, and they had an awful day. So I did dentistry work. Back then, I wanted to tell you, number of my sons. Barnard, my son Barnard, was born 1811. During the war between the states, he joined. He died in 1864. He was 53 years old when he joined the army to fight in the war between the states. I was dead. I couldn't stop him. I mean, you know how it is for those of you who have children to try to talk sense into them. Well, it's even harder after you're dead. So if you have anything to say, tell them now, because it just won't happen later. He died of typhus in New Orleans, and that's where he's buried. He's in Louisiana, and he was 53 years old when he died. So he didn't die of many young men. Many people died of disease during the war between the states. The number of illnesses, the illnesses that I would work on would be dyspepsia, ague. Ague was a big one. Flux. Oh, flux was deadly. Flux was deadly. If in a family, if someone came down with the flux, it was sure that within a month, every person in that family would be dead. Because what the flux did is it caused all the liquids they call it the flux for a reason, and people would dehydrate, and they did not know to keep drinking water, and they would just, their fever would build up and they would end up dying of a fever because they didn't have the water to perspire. So those were some of the illnesses. I was also very adept at bloodletting. Does anyone here, would anyone like to let some blood?
Probably.
What a group you are. You don't want your teeth
I know.
pulled, you don't want to give out blood. Might as well stay there, no business. So as you see, I died, it was Christmas Eve in 1845. And that was kind of a sad thing because I did like Christmas, but I guess it was probably something that people would remember on Christmas Eve. They'd remember me. And it was a good thing that I'd left Littleton at the time it came down here because there was no possible way I wanted to die up there. So I died right here in Woodsville. And that's my burial. Do you have any questions? Are you sure you don't want any teeth pulled?
What else you got in your bag?
Pardon?
What else do you have in your bag?
Well, I have a saw.
Huh?
For when people would break, being on farms, if people received a compound fracture, there was no way of setting it, so you would amputate. And so I had a saw. A good doctor could remove a limb in about 2 minutes because I imagine it hurt. So we would have people, I would put a tourniquet. If someone fell off their plow, or they didn't have it, they walked behind the plow. But if they fell, if they broke, like children used to, children climbing trees and playing up in the hayloft, they would fall. If they broke a leg with a compound fracture, I would put a tourniquet, and then I would take a lance, and I would make a slice on the top, slice on the bottom, right to the bone, and in 3 saws, if my saw was sharp. I tried to keep it sharp. If it was dull, it took me a while. But with three cuts, I could be through, and then I would have a red hot iron in the fire, and I would cauterize the. Are your stomachs turning? Okay, Mama Doctor, remember, if anyone passes out, I will pull a tooth. I would cauterize, and then the end of it, I would tie the flap of skin. I'd sew it, and then you put hot tar on it to seal it. Sometimes the hot tar would really work. It acted as a disinfectant. There was an agent in the hot tar, but sometimes the person would end up with gangrene and they'd end up dying anywhere, so they'd be with their lug eventually. So, do you have any other questions? Any comments? No amputations? Well, thank you for coming by to visit me.
Thank you.